For those of you who don't know, Sidney Powell has been sued. Sidney Powell, Lynn Wood, Giuliani, Pillow Guy, Michael Lindell, I don't mean to demean him, that was my Pillow Guy, have all been sued for $1.3 billion for defamation by Dominion. Sidney Powell filed a motion to dismiss, it was this week or last week, but recently, seeking to dismiss the defamation claim. And it's a 90-page motion to dismiss. There's jurisdiction. It raises everything. But the one thing that it raised that made the headlines, everyone in the mainstream media is running with the headline, Sidney Powell's defense in the motion to dismiss is that no reasonable person would have taken her statements to be statements of fact. And then they pull out the section where she says it was obviously opinion, without really fleshing out that the argument is opinion, as in legal opinion, to be proven in a court of law because it was in the context of pending litigation or upcoming litigation, impending litigation. I have two questions, and I think I'm confused, and you can hopefully clarify this. It came up in the Osundara brothers suing Mark Garagos and Tina Glangian and Garagos law firm for defamation for things they said about the Osundara brothers in the context of the Jussie Smollett representation. And in their lawsuit, they got ahead of the ball in terms of what I thought was litigation privilege, in that you can't really sue attorneys for making statements about their client in the context of defending their clients, setting aside exceptional circumstances, because it would chill the effect to practice law if lawyers would get sued personally for defamation for making factually incorrect statements that are part of pleadings that need to be proven or disproven. So litigation privilege as a whole, can you just explain how that works and whether or not it is or is not at play in Sidney Powell's motion to dismiss?
Well, our case law around it is not the most robust. There's some lack of clarity and key components. Here's what's definitely clear. If anything you file in court and that is later reported is absolute litigation privilege. So nobody can be sued, including the media, as long as they report accurately and fairly what was said in court, for anything you say in court. So years ago, for example, I had a case that involved a very powerful individual. And my client was his tax CPA, was his tax return preparer guy. And he got into trouble because of part of a tax shelter that wasn't done by my client, it was done by somebody else. But this guy, who was very, very politically connected, he was the biggest donor in the history of the Democratic Party at that time. Just big in Hollywood, big in the music industry, big in a wide range of spaces, big in publishing, would later own Univision, so people can look him up as to who he was. So he was waging political and legal war, in my view, against my client, trying to help railroad my client to save his own rear end, and for things that my client wasn't responsible for. And I had to detail why my client was unfortunately picked up with 2 false passports and $300,000 in cash. So I was trying to get him out on bail. I did get him out on bail, by the way, and got the U.S. attorney that was bringing the case ended up leaving when he was about to get promoted to one of the top positions. Too bad. So sad. But one of the arguments I was making was that my client had good reason to fear for his well-being and safety based on what this very powerful billionaire had said to him over the years. And I said this inside court, that what this guy had bragged about getting, I won't go into detail here, but let's just say it was some unfortunate, it'd be the kind of things that might motivate you to have a few extra passports if you thought he was coming after you because of what intelligence agencies he was connected to, this billionaire. Well, unfortunately for this billionaire, the media reported it even differently than I described it. And it spread around the world that this guy actually had a history of actually getting people whacked by these different intelligence agencies, which is not what I said. I said that he had a history of saying and claiming he did. So too bad for that guy. His reputation went pshoo, but couldn't have happened to a better individual. But if they had reported accurately what I said, they were completely immune from suit because it's what's said in court. So you file a suit, and let's say you're the lawyer, you can talk about what you filed. You can talk about how that is. All of that is also protected because you're referencing what was been filed or said inside the courtroom. To give another example, the prosecutors who have lied about Kyle Rittenhouse repeatedly, they do their lying through their court filing, knowing that nobody can be sued for the lies they file in court. So now the flip side is lawyers tend to assume that anything they say in anticipation of litigation or that was said as to defend or justify their litigation but was not said in court is also definitely immune. And you're in much more riskier position. Sometimes it's immune, sometimes it isn't. Frankly, it depends on which state you're in, which courtroom you're in. And so that's the scope of it. And that's where That's where a part of, I believe, the Smollett case moved forward. Though this is not Smollett's not a named party, but it's about what his lawyers did to the two brothers. And the same would be the case with Sidney Powell. Some of what she did and said fit within litigation privilege. Some of what she said and did depends on the court that she's in as to whether litigation privilege applies. So I would say the one analysis not to read and watch is the imbecilic advice by that litigation loser, Legal Eagle, who did it's the YouTube is bombarding his version of Sidney Powell, and he's frankly here's some advice to folks out there. If you're going to talk about a defamation defendant and the lawyer in the defamation defense, don't defame them in your analysis by falsely reporting. This is like fair reporting, immune. This is another version of litigation privilege. They can talk about what her defense is and be totally immune. They can't mischaracterize what her defense is, like little David Frenchie did, and be immune. Both of them could be sued by Sidney Powell for libel because they misrepresented what her defense was in court.
It is. I mean, it's shocking just because, the headlines say it. No reasonable person would take it to be a question of fact. It was relatively, I still think she's in trouble.
No reasonable person would think I was telling the truth. No reasonable person would believe me. It's no reasonable person would interpret this statement to be a factual statement rather than a statement of opinion. And what Legal Eagle did was deliberate defamation. He defamed Sidney Powell. He lied about it. She should just sue him for heck. There'd be some lawyers willing to help for that for free. But and David French, same thing. Neither one. You pointed it out to David French. You're like, did you actually read the motion or did you just read the newsline versions of it? All these media people lied about her defense, and it's extraordinary. It's like I've been extraordinarily critical when we have suggested serious problems with a lot of what she said from the very beginning. But so that's where you can cover her weaknesses in this legal case fairly without lying. But they can't. They had to lie about it.
No, and the thing is, I remember my thought progression with Sidney Powell is she gave the first interviews, and I said, she looks like she knows what she's saying. She's speaking with determination and confidence. And then 4 days later, I was saying, like, it's nice to speak with determination and confidence, but if you don't actually start producing the evidence that you said exists, it's not going to look well, neither in the court of public opinion or the actual court. And it just slowly went downhill from there. And then you and I began exploring these other things, which I had no total appreciation about, which we don't need to get into now. But yeah, it's so. But even in her motion to dismiss, it was not what the media was saying is nobody would think it was a fact, and therefore they would think I was deliberate, like lying or didn't believe it. All that she said is, I'm a lawyer representing a position, and when I make the statements, everyone should assume that there are statements from a lawyer that need to be proven in court. Now, I still disagree because saying that you have the evidence is different than presenting a position. And I genuinely believe she said, I have the evidence, and obviously never produced it or did not produce adequate evidence, which is a judge going to say that's a lawyer doing his or her job as an attorney, trying to get the public set up and involved in a lawsuit? Or is it a lawyer saying that they have evidence that they don't have, or as alleged in some of the other proceedings, a lawyer preparing evidence or falsifying evidence in order to create a lawsuit? But I can't understand the litigation privilege aspect of it, where she's not specifically invoking it, but she's effectively saying, I'm a lawyer representing a position, and everyone should have understood that what I was saying was what I intend on pleading in court, and it'll be up to the court to determine whether or not it's true.
Now, in truth, she also could have couched it that way, which would have protected her position.
Yeah.
And some of us were saying that loud and clear at the time, publicly and privately. Unfortunately, certain people didn't want to listen. And so they're in a problem of their own creation. So I'm not overly sympathetic. And I think that to some degree, it was not the best defense to raise for the court of public opinion. Because like when I was doing all the Alex Jones work, very careful about the defenses that I raised because I knew how they would be misportrayed. So like, he brought an anti-slap motion. The goal was to make it clear we weren't seeking any fees or costs from the other side, even though he's entitled to it. Because otherwise the media was going to run with a headline that was Alex Jones demands these poor families pay him a bunch of money. I mean, so you have to know how the court of public opinion is going to interpret things when you're a public actor trying to protect your public reputation. And that could have been couched a lot better. And frankly, some of the claims were not legally that strong. Some of these claims, a lot of them were just statements of fact. They just weren't opinions, in my view. I don't think a court is likely to interpret them as opinions.
No, and especially like when we had talked about it from the beginning, certain even if they were opinions, even illegal opinions to be proven in court, history of the companies, the corporate structure of the companies are not. These are, if they are opinions to be proven or disproven in court, they're arguably reckless to not just get certain basic facts right. But I'm a reasonable person. I took it to be statements of fact. We have the evidence, and we're going to release it. And then, as time went on,
specific. What people forget is just because an opinion doesn't mean it's immune. It has to be so vague and so uncertain that nobody can determine what you're saying from a factual perspective, that no jury could make a factual finding concerning it. Saying someone committed perjury is an opinion, but you can be sued for it. The U.S. Supreme Court determined that 20 years ago. So people tend to forget. They think anything that's an opinion is protected. Ask the New York Times. It just got smacked around in New York that we talked about last week. Not every opinion is protected. If there's anything about it that infers a fact, even if it doesn't state a fact, can constitute actionable defamation under the law.
That's it. It's like saying, in my opinion, this person committed a crime. Well, I mean, you're making an opinion of a statement of fact, and you can't hide the statement of fact behind the in my opinion, allegedly, purportedly, et cetera, et cetera. And it goes back to a discussion we had a while back, and it comes up time and time again, how you take these battles to social media. It's always risky to talk about a case, but how it could have been presented, where I think there would have been no exposure. We're going to take this to court. This is our client's position. This is what we intend to prove in court, and it will, and that's where it will be adjudicated. Yes. But everyone knows when you couch it that way that it's not soft talk. It's just that it's an attorney speaking properly. What she did was much different, and we were talking about it from the beginning. I was a little slower to it than you, but So it's interesting. It's litigation privilege, absolute in written pleadings. And as we've seen, and as I sort of did my own research, but it's jurisdictional and court-wise, if you stretch the bounds of what is necessary to represent a client, it can land you in court, as it did in the Osundara brothers. They filed a motion to dismiss against Garagos and Glangian, dismissed all but one count, and they're going to have to defend against defamation when they referred to the whiteface aspect of Justice Smollett's attack and implied it was a hate crime, which the Osundara brothers alleges defamatory.
Yes. And that's where, they could have said, this is what we said in court. They could say, we believe the evidence when presented. We believe this evidence will be. But they didn't do that. They didn't couch it. They didn't caveat it, because what the courts recognize that if you couch something, then they realize, okay, you're asking the person to look at the underlying source. You're asking the person to wait for a future event. You're not saying that this is definitely the truth. You're saying you believe this will in fact be proven once evidence is, et cetera. And there were a lot of ways to couch it. Powell, for example, could have been said, the information I've been given says that this is what's happened. The other side disputes it. I'm going to take it to court to see if we can prove it. That would be much harder claim to bring. Yeah. And I can absolutely, I've seen this, and there's mail ballots that came from China. The Epoch Times confirmed this past week another thing that we were talking about 3 months ago, going back to that earlier super chat about we've been more accurate than 90% of everyone else. And that's just God's honest truth. Said from the get-go that whole ballots coming from China were somehow secretly laundered in, and they were counted. Made no sense. The whole Italian story made no sense. The German server story. Yeah,
the German server. I mean, and I'm skeptical of everything in general, but we discussed it. It's like none of this makes any sense. You specified at the time, raised all of the awareness that this could be a harmful distraction to the legitimate questions of law, and it panned out to be not just true but prophetic. Where it's a shame more people weren't listening. More people in certain positions were not listening. Robert, in my analysis of the Osundara brothers and that judgment that dismissed all but one claim of the defamation against Garagos and Glangian, am I wrong in thinking that the judge, that's a needle to Garagos and Glangian? Because that judge could have easily found a way to this. I thought the whiteface statement was among the least, if there were any that were defamatory, of those statements. So for my own benefit, for my own ego, what on earth was up with the judge leaving that one claim for them to proceed on?
So it doesn't go to appeal right away, is my take. It's similar to what the federal judge ultimately did in the Sandman cases, that when he got pushback from a lot of litigation we were filing in front of the same judge, he decided, okay, the best way I can avoid a Sandman appeal and a reversal is to let something move forward. I'm going to let one claim out of the 20 move forward, knowing that meant they had to go through discovery, and usually those cases then settle, and that's it. Particularly Lynn Wood's cases tended to settle. So that's how that doesn't surprise me. That's what a judge will do when they think, there's enough wrong here about what happened that I might get reversed on appeal.
Yeah.
I'll leave something in so that it goes through discovery. It will probably settle, probably will never see the light of day again. I don't have to worry about appellate risk. And there's some fairness and justice done for something that feels fundamentally something that was wrong here.
All right. And incidentally, one of my other lawyer sources who checks the court files mentioned that the defamation case has been put on hold pending a resolution of the criminal case. So we should probably not have an update on the Osundara brothers defamation for a little while. Now, Marcus Horn asked, and I can't read the question out loud because YouTube has very strict rules, as Rudy Giuliani knows, about his endorsements. Why Robert has something in his hand that he doesn't use. If he were to use it on YouTube, it would be a problem for YouTube.